They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I've always thought that was a bit cliché, a little too theatrical. For me, it's not about the temperature of the revenge, but its precision, its quiet devastation. I've never been one for screaming matches, for throwing plates, or tearful public breakdowns after someone's shown me their true, disrespectful colors. No. When I'm disrespected, truly, deeply disrespected, I don't get loud. I get quiet. I get methodical. I make them wish they'd never cross that line. Not with a bang, but with a whisper that haunts them long after I'm gone. My ex, let's call him Liam, he learned that lesson. He learned it the hard way, in the hallowed halls of his prestigious college campus, a place where he thought he was untouchable. To this very day, Liam believes a random shadowy frat bro, some phantom observer, meticulously unraveled his deceitful little world and exposed him as the cheat he was. He has absolutely no idea that the architect of his paranoia, the ghost in his machine, was me. The girlfriend he thought he could play, the one he assumed was hundreds of miles away, too naive or too broken to do anything but cry. He couldn't have been more wrong.
Our story, like many, started with promise, or at least the illusion of it, but it quickly descended into a familiar, ugly pattern. Liam wasn't just a casual jerk, he was a connoisseur of cruelty, specializing in emotional and verbal abuse. He was manipulative, a master gaslighter, the kind of person who could look you dead in the eye while convincing you that your own feelings were invalid, that his barbs were just jokes you were too sensitive to understand, or worse, that his mistreatment was somehow your fault. We were long distance at the time. He'd gone off to embrace the grand adventure of college life in another state, leaving me behind, a fixed point in his expanding universe. Or so he thought. I was just there, the reliable, understanding girlfriend holding down the fort. Or, in his eyes, probably the convenient emotional punching bag he could call when he needed to feel powerful or vent his frustrations. The distance, which I initially believed was just a hurdle, became his shield, a curtain behind which he could perform his duplicity. The calls became less frequent, his excuses more elaborate, the affection more strained, replaced by a casual disdain that pricked at my composure. I'm not an idiot. I sensed the shift. The air between us grew colder, thinner with each passing week. There was a gnawing feeling in my gut, that instinctual alarm bell that chimes when something is profoundly wrong. But it was his carelessness, his sheer arrogance that finally ripped the blindfold from my eyes. Surprise, surprise, I found out he was cheating. Not a one-time slip-up, not a drunken mistake he regretted, but a consistent pattern of betrayal. That discovery was the final, irrevocable straw. Any lingering affection, any shred of hope that we could salvage what we had, evaporated in that instant. It wasn't a fiery rage that consumed me, not initially. It was a cold, hard clarity, a profound sense of finality. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a dramatic breakup. I wouldn't give him the scene he probably expected, the tears he might even have found perversely validating. Oh no, I didn't want to just end things. I wanted him haunted. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the unease, the quiet torment he'd so expertly inflicted on me for months, for what felt like an eternity. I wanted him to look over his shoulder, to question his own sanity, to understand that actions have consequences, sometimes silent, creeping ones. So I made a decision. I wouldn't confront him. I wouldn't scream or cry or demand answers he'd only lie his way out of. Instead, I would become his ghost, the anonymous author of his perfectly crafted downfall. and I would enjoy every single moment of it. The stage was set, not for a play he could control, but for a psychological thriller where he was the unsuspecting lead and I was the director, hidden in the shadows, pulling every string. He thought he was living his best college life. He had no idea he was about to star in his own personal horror show. The decision to seek a more creative form of justice wasn't born from a single explosive moment of rage, but from a slow, simmering burn of countless indignities. Liam's emotional and verbal abuse had been a masterclass in insidious erosion. He never threw a punch, never left a visible bruise. His weapons were words, silences, implications. He'd call me, full of his campus exploits, his new friends, his brilliant insights, and if I shared something of my own, something that mattered to me, he'd find a way to subtly belittle it, to make me feel small and provincial. "Oh, that's nice, Maya," he'd say, his tone dripping with a condescension that made my stomach clench. Or he'd twist my concerns into accusations of neediness. "Why are you always so dramatic? Can't you just be happy for me?" He'd sigh, as if my desire for basic respect was an intolerable burden. He was an expert at gaslighting. I'd remember conversations, promises, clear as day, only for him to deny them outright, looking at me through the video call screen with such convincing bewilderment that I'd start to question my own memory. "I never said that, Maya. You're imagining things again. You're always so stressed. Maybe you should try to relax more." He made me feel like I was perpetually on the verge of hysteria, like my emotions were unreliable, my perceptions flawed. I started to doubt myself, to second-guess every feeling, every intuition. That was his goal, of course, to isolate me in a cage of my own uncertainty, making him the sole arbiter of reality. The long distance amplified this. I had no objective measure, no friends nearby to witness his behavior and validate my experiences. It was just his voice in my ear, his face on my screen, slowly chipping away at my self-worth. I remember one particular evening, I'd been excited about a small personal achievement, something I'd worked hard for. When I told him, his response was a dismissive grunt, followed by a lengthy monologue about a party he'd been to, the amazing people he was meeting, the incredible opportunities opening up for him. It was like I hadn't spoken. Like my life, my world, was a trivial footnote to his grand narrative. That night, something hardened within me. The hurt was still there, a dull ache, but it was accompanied by a new, colder emotion: contempt. I realized I wasn't just unhappy, I was being systematically dismantled. Then came the cheating. I didn't stumble upon it through a dramatic confrontation or a friend's tearful confession. It was far more banal, and in a way more insulting. A forgotten setting on an app, a careless comment he let slip, a digital breadcrumb trail left by an ego too inflated to bother with thorough cleanup. He'd turned off his main location sharing for me early on, a red flag I'd tried to rationalize. But the dumbass forgot about Snapchat. His Snap Map was a constellation of late-night bar hops, unfamiliar apartments, and locations that starkly contrasted with his quiet night in studying alibis. It wasn't just one girl, either. It was a pattern, a lifestyle built on deceit. The confirmation didn't unleash a torrent of tears. Instead, a profound, almost serene calmness settled over me. It was the calm of a surgeon before a complex operation. The last straw hadn't broken me. It had solidified my resolve. He wasn't going to get a tearful phone call. He wasn't going to get the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. Or the drama of a messy breakup he could later recount to his new conquests as evidence of my instability. No, he was going to get something far more memorable. I didn't want closure in the traditional sense. I wanted him to understand on a visceral level what it felt like to be played, to be watched, to have his security blanket yanked away. I wanted him haunted. And so my project began. I spent months, yes, months, quietly collecting receipts. My grief and anger were channeled into a meticulous, almost obsessive focus. I became a digital archaeologist, sifting through the remnants of his online life. I paid attention to everything. The names of new girls he suddenly followed on Instagram, their friend circles, their tagged photos, the locations he popped up at on that telltale Snap map, cross-referencing them with local campus maps and bar websites. I noted the names of bars and hangout spots he seemed to frequent around his college town. I looked for mutual connections, no matter how tenuous. I memorized names, dates, times. I saved screenshots, snippets of information, building a case file like a damn FBI profiler. It was almost a perverse comfort, this methodical gathering. Each piece of data was a small, cold stone laid on the path to his reckoning. He thought he was so clever, so insulated by the distance and his own lies. He had no idea I was building a psychological labyrinth just for him, brick by painstaking brick. I learned the rhythm of his new life from afar, the names of his new companions, the geography of his deceptions. I was patient, I was thorough, and I was utterly invisible. The detective in me was fully awakened, and my target had no idea he was already under surveillance. The game, as they say, was afoot, but only I knew the rules.
After months of silent, patient intelligence gathering, my case file on Liam was thicker than any textbook he was supposedly studying. I knew his haunts, his new circle, the names that now peppered his conversations, the ones he bothered to have with me at least. The time for passive observation was over. It was time to introduce a new character into his carefully curated campus life, a phantom, a whisper, a seed of doubt that would blossom into full-blown paranoia.
I created a fake Instagram account. This needed to be perfect, untraceable back to me, yet utterly believable to him. I chose the persona of a generic frat guy from his school. Let's call him Chad from Sigma Alpha. The profile picture was a carefully selected stock photo of some blandly handsome guy at a tailgate party, slightly out of focus, anonymous enough to be anyone. The bio was a masterpiece of bro speak, living the dream at A, his university name, Sigma Alpha till I die, good vibes only. I populated it with a few generic campus shots, reposted a couple of university event flyers, and followed a slew of local businesses, campus organizations, and, crucially, a few of the bigger, more impersonal meme accounts popular at his university. It looked legit. It looked like just another face in the campus crowd. The first move was subtle, designed to pique his interest and plant the initial seed of unease, but through me, his supposedly clueless girlfriend. Using a burner app to generate a temporary number for my Chad persona to text from, or rather, I decided to have Chad DM my own Instagram account, making it even more direct, I crafted the opening salvo. I texted myself from Chad's Instagram account. The message was short, to the point. Hey, I think I go to his university name with your boyfriend, Liam. Listen, this is awkward, but I've seen some stuff. I think he's cheating on you. Got proof if you want it. Then, with a steady hand and a heart beating a little faster with anticipation, I received this message on my phone while I was on a video call with Liam. I let my eyes widen. I feigned shock, confusion. Liam, who is Chad from SA? I asked, turning my phone screen towards the camera, showing him the message. The color drained from his face almost instantly. His casual, dismissive demeanor shattered. "What the hell is that?" he stammered, leaning closer to his screen. "Don't reply to that, Maya. Block him right now. It's probably some weirdo, some psycho. Just block the account, seriously." He was agitated, his voice sharp with an urgency that was far more telling than any confession. He went off, ranting about crazy people, stalkers, how you can't trust anyone online. I, of course, played the part of the confused, hurt, and slightly scared girlfriend perfectly. But what if it's true, Liam? Why would someone just make that up? I asked, my voice trembling ever so slightly. His panic was palpable. He was already squirming, and this was just the overture. He insisted over and over that I block Chad immediately and never speak of it again. I agreed, reluctantly, adding another layer to my performance of the dutiful, trusting girlfriend.
The next day, it was time for the main event. I waited until I knew Liam would be relatively free, probably lounging in his dorm, doom-scrolling on his phone. From Chad's account, I sent a long, incredibly detailed message to my own Instagram account, the one Liam knew. This message was the culmination of all my research, a carefully constructed narrative designed to sound like it came from someone who was always watching him. I didn't just say, I saw him with a girl. Oh no. I included the name of the dimly lit off-campus bar he favored on Tuesday nights. I mentioned the specific brand of craft beer he'd recently posted about. I named one of the girls he'd been conspicuously liking on Instagram. Was that you with a tall brunette? Looked like a Jessica or Jenna from the photos? Outside the Gilded Mug last week? You left around 1 a.m.? I mentioned seeing him looking stressed near the economics department building on a particular afternoon, a detail I'd gleaned from a fleeting background in one of his Snap Map stories. I dropped names of specific, slightly niche campus events he'd attended, things a casual acquaintance wouldn't necessarily clock, let alone report to his long-distance girlfriend. Dude, you're always at that corner table at Perk Up Cafe by the library, usually with that loud guy from your poli-sci class, right? The one with the red backpack? Every detail was a pinprick, designed to make him feel exposed, surrounded. The message ended with a chillingly vague, "You should be more careful, man. People watch. People talk, especially when you're messing with someone's girlfriend from back home." I let the message sit there for a few hours, then discovered it, and immediately called Liam, this time in hysterics. "Liam, that Chad guy, he messaged me again. He sent this insane list of things. He knows where you go. He knows who you talk to. He described that bar you told me about. How could he know all this?" I read out excerpts, my voice thick with feigned terror and accusation. The effect was instantaneous and spectacular. Liam completely unraveled. He went from defensive to utterly panicked. He started rambling, trying to explain away each detail, then getting tangled in his own lives. It's not, I mean, those places are popular. Anyone could see me, he'd bluster. Then his voice would crack. The sheer specificity of Chad's knowledge was too much. He couldn't rationalize it away. The carefully constructed facade of his double life was crumbling before his eyes, not because of my accusations, but because of this omniscient, anonymous frat bro. He genuinely thought he was being stalked, perhaps by a jealous rival, a disgruntled classmate, or just a campus lunatic with a vendetta. He started confessing, not just to the cheating I already knew about, but to other indiscretions, other lies, pouring it all out in a torrent of panicked admissions, presumably hoping to get ahead of whatever Chad might reveal next. He was so terrified, so convinced that someone was physically tracking his every move that he told me he was going to campus police. Campus police, to report the stalker I had invented from my bedroom hundreds of miles away. The irony was so potent, so delicious, I almost broke character. Listening to him babble, to his voice cracking with genuine fear, watching his smug arrogance dissolve into a puddle of pitiable terror, that was my climax. My meticulously crafted plan had worked beyond my wildest dreams. He wasn't just caught, he was psychologically shattered, living in a nightmare of my own making. And I was the concerned girlfriend offering hollow words of comfort, all while savoring the quiet, exquisite taste of victory.
Liam's descent into paranoia was, for me, a peculiar kind of ascent. This wasn't a rebirth in the sense of finding a new love or embarking on a soul-searching journey across continents. My transformation was quieter, internal, forged in the crucible of his undoing. For so long, he had made me feel powerless, small, like my voice didn't matter. His emotional jabs, his gaslighting, his casual disregard, they had all been designed to diminish me, to keep me in a box labeled the naive long-distance girlfriend. But as I listened to his panicked confessions, as I pictured him nervously scanning faces on campus, jumping at shadows, the dynamic had irrevocably shifted. I wasn't the one looking over my shoulder anymore. He was.
My growth wasn't about learning to forgive him or finding peace through letting go in the conventional sense. My growth was in the realization of my own strength, my own capacity for strategic thinking and flawless execution. He had underestimated me profoundly, and that underestimation was his downfall. There was an almost clinical satisfaction in watching the plan unfold exactly as I'd envisioned. Each frantic call from him, each new detail of his spiraling fear was a confirmation of my power, not a loud, aggressive power, but the quiet, unshakable power of intelligence and control. I had taken the pain he inflicted, and instead of letting it consume me, I had molded it into a weapon, a precision tool to dismantle his arrogance. During those weeks, while he was living his self-inflicted horror story, I was remarkably calm. I continued my life, my studies, my work, with a newfound focus. The energy that had once been consumed by analyzing his moods, by trying to decipher his mixed signals, by nursing the wounds of his latest barb, was now freed. It was liberating. I had created a contained chaos in his life, and in doing so, found a strange kind of order in my own. I learned to compartmentalize with chilling efficiency. On the phone with him, I was the picture of concern, offering suggestions. Maybe you should talk to your RA. Are you sure you locked your door? All the while, the puppeteer in me was silently applauding the performance. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my narrative. He had tried to write me as a footnote in his story, a passive victim. I had rewritten the entire script, casting him as the haunted figure and myself as the unseen force. There was a profound sense of agency in that. I wasn't waiting for karma to catch up with him. I had given it a very specific, personalized nudge. My confidence, which he had so diligently tried to erode, began to rebuild itself on a new foundation, not on external validation, but on the clear evidence of my own capabilities. I could take a complex problem, devise a multifaceted solution, and implement it flawlessly, all while maintaining perfect composure. That knowledge was empowering.
It's a strange thing to admit, but orchestrating Liam's paranoia was, in a dark way, therapeutic. It was a way of externalizing the internal turmoil he had put me through. He had made my reality feel unstable with his gaslighting. Now, his reality was unstable thanks to Chad. He had made me doubt my sanity. Now he was doubting his, wondering who this invisible enemy was, why they were targeting him. The scales had not just been balanced, they had been tipped decisively. My comeback wasn't about showing him I could be happy without him or finding a new, better partner to flaunt. It was about demonstrating, primarily to myself, that I would not be broken by his disrespect. I would not be erased. Instead, I could become a force to be reckoned with, all without raising my voice. The real rebirth was the emergence of this quieter, stronger, more resolute Maya, someone who knew her worth and was no longer afraid to protect it, albeit in unconventional ways. He had inadvertently taught me the art of psychological warfare, and I had proven to be an unexpectedly gifted student. The silence on my end, my calm demeanor throughout his panic, was the ultimate power move. He was spiraling, and I was serene, a quiet storm that had passed, leaving him to deal with the wreckage.
The campus police investigation, as expected, went absolutely nowhere. How could it? They were chasing a ghost, a digital phantom conjured from my resentment and Wi-Fi. There were no credible threats, no physical evidence, just the frantic ramblings of a terrified young man who claimed an anonymous Instagram account knew too much about his private life. To them, it probably sounded like a prank gone too far. Or perhaps Liam himself was hiding something more. They likely filed a report, advised him to be more careful online, and moved on. The stalker, Chad from Sigma Alpha, vanished as mysteriously and silently as he had appeared. The Instagram account was deactivated, its digital footprint erased.
Liam, however, was not so quick to move on. The experience left an indelible mark on him. Friends who knew us both, or rather knew of me through him, later relayed in hushed tones how much he'd changed. He became more reserved, jumpier, less of the cocksure campus king he'd fancied himself to be. He was, by all accounts, haunted. He'd look over his shoulder more often, eye strangers with suspicion. The swagger had been replaced by a nervous energy. His carefully constructed world had been shaken to its core, and he had no one to blame but a faceless Instagram profile that had evaporated into thin air. The beauty of it was its untraceability, its sheer inexplicability from his perspective.
And the apologies? Oh, they started during his panic, gushing out alongside his confessions. But they didn't stop when Chad went silent. If anything, they intensified in the quiet aftermath. To this day, years later, he still tries to reach out. Every few months, like clockwork, a new message will appear in my inbox. A long, dramatic email, a tentative DM on a platform I rarely use. They are filled with profound regrets, with declarations of how much he's changed, how he realizes now what he lost, how he hopes I'm doing well, how he wishes he could turn back time. He paints himself as a reformed man, forever scarred by his past misdeeds and the terrifying, inexplicable stalking incident that served as his brutal wake-up call. He talks about karma, about how the universe found a way to show him the error of his ways. He still has absolutely no idea that the universe, in this instance, had a name, and it was mine. He'll go to his grave wondering about the phantom frat bro, the campus stalker who knew his secrets, never once suspecting that the architect of his psychological torment was the quiet, unassuming girlfriend he'd so casually and cruelly underestimated. There's a unique, almost perverse satisfaction in that enduring ignorance. It's my secret, my quiet, lasting victory. I don't usually respond to his messages. What would be the point? My revenge was never about getting an apology from him, at least not a sincere one, extracted under duress. It was about him experiencing a consequence, a lasting one, for his actions. It was about him understanding that the world doesn't revolve solely around his desires and that treating people with contempt can have unforeseen, unsettling repercussions.
Where am I now? I'm doing well. More than well. I learned a lot from that experience. About myself, about my limits, and about my capabilities. I'm certainly not proud of the deception in a moral black and white sense, but I'm not ashamed of it either. It was a chapter. A dark one, perhaps, but one where I took control of a narrative that was trying to crush me. I found a strength I didn't know I possessed, a capacity for cold calculation that, while unsettling to acknowledge, was incredibly effective.
There's a certain peace in knowing that he's out there, still carrying that paranoia, still regretting his choices, all because of a meticulously crafted illusion. He wanted to break me with his disrespect, with his cruelty and infidelity. Instead, I just broke his peace of mind, subtly and irrevocably. And honestly, I sleep great at night. The silence of my victory is far more satisfying than any screaming match could ever have been. He learned his lesson, not from a confrontation, but from a haunting. And some lessons, especially those learned in the dark, stay with you forever.
They say you can't fight fire with fire, that you should rise above, turn the other cheek. But sometimes, when someone tries to burn your world down with their disrespect, you don't need more fire. You need precision. You need to become the architect of their unease, the quiet echo of their own misdeeds. He thought he was breaking me, but he was just teaching me how to build a better trap. So, if someone betrays you, if they try to diminish you, ask yourself, will you let it break you, or will it build you into something they never saw coming?